Hi, and welcome to the Revolution Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Olivera, and it's my goal to bring you clear cut strategies and drills designed to help make you and your program better. With that in mind, let's begin. All right, so today's guest was featured in the inspirational Disney movie, The Rookie, where he was a science teacher that made it all the way to the bigs. He is currently a motivational speaker and the author of the book Dream Makers, none other than Jim the Rookie Morris. How are you doing, Mr. Morris?
Great, Alex. How are you doing?
Man, cold. It's cold. Uh, so let's talk a little bit about your book, Dream Makers. What is it
Yes.
about, and where can we find it?
For 20 years, I've been doing motivational speaking since I retired from baseball. And everybody's always been like, hey, the movie's great and the story's great. But what happened after baseball? And so that's a journey in and of itself. And I never had a ending for it, right?
Right,
But when you put faith behind everything, God knows a little bit more than we do. And instead of not having an ending for 20 years, he gave me two. And so when he gave me those, we got the book out and it came out last year and it's doing really well considering
okay,
everybody's not working and going kind of stir crazy right now. So,
right,
it's just been a tumultuous time, but it was a journey through a whole lot of things that a lot of people don't know about,
right,
especially why I quit playing baseball when I did in 2001. People go, oh, you just hurt your arm again. No, that's the reason I used. It's not what happened. I was throwing 98 to 100 at Chavez Ravine in the winter in LA. And then in 5 days, I drove through Texas to see my kids and got to Vero when the Dodgers were still down there. And something happened in those 5 days to where I couldn't judge a ball. A guy would bunt the ball and I would think it was hit back at me, or they had hit the ball back at me and the center fielder's picking up. I'm like, what is going on? And then I got to where I couldn't even play catch. I was afraid I wasn't catching the ball. And then
mm,
as a coach, you teach your kids how to bunt and catch the ball with the bat. And all of a sudden I couldn't even bunt. And I'm like, what happened in 5 days? I got scared because I thought if I throw 100 up there and a guy hits it back at me 110, I'm liable to get hit in the mouth and there's nothing I can do about it.
yeah,
And so the arm was an easy excuse to get out. And plus my kids were missing me. And so it made it easier just to use that and move on. But over those next 20 years, speaking and everything else, 60 surgeries, Parkinson's diagnosis, CTE induced Parkinsonism, which turned into Parkinson's. And so it was just a long journey. And I want people to know that sometimes we get overwhelmed and you just have to have your faith in a place to where your faith is in something bigger than you. And
right,
I got to where I was depending on myself a little bit too much and God grabbed my attention.
okay. So can you tell us? I was going to go into this later, but can you tell us a little bit more about that current struggle that you have with Parkinson's disease?
Yeah, I think 2014 or 2015, I had deep brain stimulator surgery. Before that, they gave me medicine, my doctor in Houston did, and the medicine made my stomach quit working.
Mm,
And so then you had to have a gastric bypass, and you can't take the Parkinson's medication, which was helping. And so they put a deep brain stimulator in with two electrodes on each side of my forehead and then a battery pack in my chest, which makes it really pleasant when you go through TSA in the airports.
I'm sure.
And but immediately when I had that put in, I woke up and I could smell for the first time in like 5 years. And then I could taste food, and then I could button my buttons again on my dress shirts, which I couldn't do. My wife had to start traveling with me because I couldn't even tie a tie, and balance was off, no taste, no smell, and just a lot of pain along with all the nerve surgeries I was having. And when you have surgeries like that and you're on opiates before because you're in pain, and then you're on opiates during because you're having surgery, and then you're on opiates after to get well from surgery, but you're still in pain, you look for other avenues. And when your faith isn't right, and mine was lost at the time, I thought, well, I think I know more than doctors. I know my body. I think I'll add vodka to that combination.
Not a
And
good combination.
that found me in rehab. And for the first time in my life, I got to concentrate on me, and I got to fix me, and I got to fix my faith, and I got to find out the world is a lot bigger than just me. And I need to be
Right.
wary of that because I'm out there talking to people all over the world. And here I am doing things I would tell other people not to do. I never abused the painkillers. I took them like I was supposed to. I just added alcohol on top of that.
Okay.
And that was 4 years ago. And no alcohol since, no painkillers. Everything's good. I'm on the upswing through that period of time. And this is where the book has one of the endings. Now, rehab chapter is one ending, and that's humorous. And the next chapter is a faith chapter, and it talks about basically how I was healed from Parkinson's. And I've got a group of ladies at my church, and I have to call them my girls because they don't want me to call them women and they don't want me to call them ma'am. They're my girls. They're 50 to 90, but they would pray with Sean and I through every surgery and all of the troubles we went through. And they
Wow.
just kept praying for me constantly. Like when I went to rehab, I'm watching all the other people get sick detoxing. I don't even get sick. I don't detox, nothing. I'm just well. And and then I get out and I'm still having problems. I had to have another surgery because I'm dragging my leg real bad. Long story short, it's 4 years later, no alcohol, no drugs, and I'm running 3 to 5, 6 miles a day, lifting every day. While 2020 was not pleasant
No.
for most of our lives, I did have the deep brain stimulator taken out in July of last year because the Parkinson's is gone. They did the dopamine test. They had me do all their physical tests. My balance is fine. My handwriting is fine. I can smell, I can taste. I had that turned off for 2 years, and my neurosurgeon said, let's turn it off for a while and see how that goes. And once 2 years was up, he's like, well, let's take it out. He's a man of faith too, and I appreciate that. And he's like, it's time. We
Yeah.
took it out, and I've been great. And nothing is overpowering for God.
Wow. Amen. And that's pretty amazing right there. Can we talk a little bit about your journey uh from basically from high school to the pros, because you were drafted right out of high school. You went to pitch and then you decided to quit. Can we talk a little? Well, I'm telling your story, but you go ahead and tell your story.
Well, at 15, my parents did me the biggest favor that they never knew they did for me. My dad was in the military. We lived in Miami, Florida, and they didn't get along, and it was brutal. My dad was physically and verbally abusive to everybody. And so they moved me to my grandparents' house in Brownwood. When we got to Brownwood, Coach Gordon Wood was our football coach. He hated baseball, so we didn't even have high school baseball.
Ooh,
So right away, I've gone from being a freshman and being the second freshman ever make the varsity baseball team in Florida to going to Brownwood, and now you're a football player.
mm,
And so, but that taught me a lot also. And so we moved to Brownwood. I lived with my grandparents and I went to school. Those are the two best mentors I've ever had who taught me about faith, and they taught me about discipline, and they taught me not only be a good human being but a good man and how to do that. Like my grandfather had me take my grandmothers on lunch dates once a week while I was in high school so I'd know how to
that's really
treat
good.
women.
Yeah.
But during that period of time in those 3 years, he tripped in his menswear store one day, and then over the next 6 months he went from a cane to a walker to a wheelchair, and nobody could figure out what's going on. And what it came down to was he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS.
Oh,
And the brain works fine and registers everything, but the body doesn't listen anymore.
right.
And so you watch the person you love withering away in front of you. And I watched this man who carried a community on top of his shoulders when he was healthy to carrying a community on top of his shoulders from a wheelchair. And while he was sick, I graduated from high school. The Yankees drafted me in like the 19th round or something. I chose to pass because I wanted to be close to home because I knew he didn't have very long to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Ranger Junior College. Ellis Burks was there, and he was a center fielder, and I pitched, and it was a lot of fun. But during that period of time, those first 4 months of school, my grandfather passed away.
Mm,
My father
sorry.
retired from the military, came home, and now there was no barrier between myself and my father again. And so when the Brewers drafted me in January of 1983 in a supplemental draft, I took the money and ran and
Hmm.
started an up and down career. And I thought, well, if I strike out everybody here during summer league, I will strike out everybody there. And when I got there, all these guys either have contracts and they've been playing for 2 or 3 years, or they've been in college for 2 or 3 years, and I was way behind.
Right.
And so I struggled. And sometimes when we struggle, we try to push ourselves further than what we're comfortable with. And so I had Tommy John surgery, and Dr. Job said, take off a year. Well, I took off 6 weeks, and I thought, I got to get back in shape so I can pitch. My own worst enemy at the time. And so when you talk to coaches now and they're like, you learn from experience, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I learned how I would coach in the future by living my life like I did in the past. 5.5 years in minor league ball, 6 surgeries, found myself out of baseball and at 24. And I thought, well, that's what I've worked for my whole life. Since I was 5, I wanted to be a baseball player.
Right.
Now what am I going to do? And I thought, if I can't play the game I love, maybe I can teach it. And so I went back to college. I got a degree, started teaching and coaching. My science classes excelled. My baseball teams excelled. And that's when I found myself at Reagan County High School, where the movie takes place.
Okay. Wow. That's an amazing journey. A few things um, that jump out to me. Just your mindset when you're coming out of high school, going into a deeper level ball. And I found myself coaching a collegiate team this year. But the kids, a lot of the pitchers were last year's high school. They were in high school last year, and then they went to play the collegiate level this last summer. And their mentality is, I'm just going to blow it by them, and they couldn't.
Yeah.
So I basically started telling them, hey, just let them hit the ball. Let's get some outs. This game's about. Let's get outs. Don't try to blow it by them. Just strategically place the ball where you want it. And that seemed to help a little bit. Pitching backwards, things like that. But you don't hear a lot of coaches saying that. But
Yeah, we have a tendency when we're pitchers to go, I'm out here by myself, and you forget you have 8 other people out there with you
right,
who are there for that purpose. And we think we can do it all ourselves, and that's not possible. It doesn't matter who you are. And
right,
Aroldis Chapman will still give up home runs. He throws 105. People are going
right.
to catch up to it at some point because that's just how good the hitters are.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we're gonna move on to coaches' questions. So this is what I post to my friends, fellow coaches, is if you could ask former major leaguer Jim the Rookie Morris one coaching or pitching question, what would it be? And so here's number one: Cody Downing from Catalina High School in Tucson, Arizona. What was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw your fastball mysteriously increase in velocity?
Well, there were two things that crossed my mind. The first thing, when Gasly, the scout, told me what I was throwing, was there was a happy dance going on in my head because I thought, that is impossible. I threw 88 when I was young and talented, and now I'm throwing 98. Are you kidding me? The second thing that quickly ran through my mind is, you've been throwing 98 at your high school kids. You're getting sued, man. And it was just a comical thing, but it was so quick. It was like, I throw gas. Oh no, I've been throwing that hard at these kids. Well, it explains why we got knocked out of the playoffs by a kid who couldn't throw out of a wet paper bag too, because we were out in front of everything.
Oh wow. Well, wow, that's pretty amazing. I don't throw definitely don't throw 90 something to my kids. Uh I probably if I'm like 4 feet away. But that's a great thought. Coach Sam Carpenter, owner of the Dallas Mustangs Travel Club, he asks, what do you think happened to your arm between careers?
I love Sam, great man. I think the first time around, I thought I was ready, and God didn't think I was ready.
Right?
And so, as hard as I worked, it never happened. It never worked for me. I think when I gave it up and everything became about more than me, and I did it for a group of high school kids, I think that's when God went, now you're ready. And
Right.
because
Wow.
there's no way physically for me to throw the ball that hard. When I was 28, I had a surgery and the doctor cut out 85% of my deltoid muscle and said, you will never, ever pitch again, physically impossible.
Right.
Well, you come back at 35 when you're supposed to be retiring from professional ball, and now you're throwing 12 miles an hour harder than you did when you were supposed to be young and talented. That is not a physical thing. That's a God thing.
Yeah. That's a great point. That is a great point right there. Um, Coach Jesse Siegler from Quinlan Ford High School. He asked, "What kept you motivated to keep pushing to get to the major league level after so much adversity?" Number one, number two, and three. Sorry, he's got a lot of questions. How has your journey helped shaped your character in real life? And then number three is, did you ever expect your journey to be portrayed in a movie?
Let's just attack the third one first. Absolutely not. I did not do it because I thought, hey, this will make a great story. I was embarrassed and I thought, I'm going to go to this tryout and get laughed at. And that's
Right.
not what happened. How you come back from all the adversity was, and I tell coaches and I tell kids this, I say, you can talk the talk all you want to, but until you're willing to go out and walk the walk
Mm,
and show kids how to do it, and you're showing them the proper way of how you want it done instead of just barking sequences at them and telling them what to do. Once they see you doing that and they see you sweating with them, they'll break their backs for you. And when they did that, when I pushed them, they pushed back, and I made them better, but they made me better.
right.
And I learned that there are no ceilings. That even though everybody on the outside of this circle, outside these white lines, think we're not supposed to be that good, we ended up being that good because we believed in each other and we lifted each other up as a team. It's not a me thing; it's a we thing.
Right.
And number two, during the journey with baseball, how I didn't quit was because I made a promise, and I was going to see the promise through. Now, I had a safety net, and not everybody understands that. I had a football coaching job at a big high school in Fort Worth, which the coach was leaving open for me if I bombed out of the minors when I was in AAA in 1999. And he
Okay.
left the job open for me until the very last second. And then when I got called up, he came to my first game when I was at the ballpark in Arlington. And so it's just special. He goes, I cannot even believe at 35 you did that. He goes, when I called you and you told me where you were, I thought you were out of your mind. He goes, I don't think that anymore.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, how was that when you and I've seen some reports of what you've said, but just if you don't mind sharing with your with the listeners, how was that just coming out, to Arlington and pitching there?
Well, first, the Disney did a great job with the movie. John Lee Hancock, the director, and Dennis playing me, they did a great job portraying it, but there is no way to ever capture the beauty that I went through and thinking, this never worked the first time. Why would it work this time? But keeping my promise and staying where I was and seeing the journey through, and then coming back to my home state in my favorite ballpark with everybody I know and love watching me. And Johnny Oates, the opposing manager, God rest his soul, letting 150 people in the game that day that had ties to me, that is one of the most beautiful moments I've ever been through in my life.
Hmm.
Because you're playing the game you love with your name and your number on your back, and you're in a clubhouse with Wade Boggs and Roberto Hernandez and Fred McGriff and Jose Canseco. You're just like, it doesn't get any better than that. And I walk into the clubhouse, and Wade Boggs is the first person to see me, and they've heard about the crazy science teacher for 3 months. And he goes, that is the best story I've ever heard in my life. I'm
Wow.
still a fan and a coach, right? I'm like,
Right.
you're Wade Boggs and you like chicken. And he just giggled at me and walked off. But it was a special moment. And again, the movie did a great job, but real life, man, God can paint a picture prettier than anybody.
Yeah, that's true. That is so true. Um, all right, so moving on. Coach David Lara from Carter Riverside, he asks, how many bullpen throwing sessions, how many bullpen or throwing sessions should a high school pitcher have in between starts?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question. And there's a couple of answers to that. If you're playing twice a week, I would like my kids to throw every other day. And whether we're working on location or working on a secondary pitch or third pitch, depends a lot on when we're playing, who we're playing, and who I plan on pitching and using. Because if we get in a situation where my kid is supposed to throw a bullpen that day and I can use him out of the pen during a game for an inning and he gets his pitches in and I get the benefit of having him pitch, that's the same thing to me. That's getting your work in, that's getting your innings in. On the other side of that, I'd never wanted to overthrow a kid. And
Right.
there are kids I've coached that needed me to step on them. We're all coaches. We all know that there are kids who need to be guided every step of the way. And there are other kids in your team who all you need to do is point and they know exactly what you want.
Right.
Asa Lacey, I worked with that kid from the time he was 14 and he was like 5'9" and 120 pounds. But as soon as I watched him pitch, his parents had me come out and look at him. And before he threw his third pitch, I said, "Can I please work with him?" And how I work with that kid is his work ethic and his character and integrity were such that all I had to do was say a couple of words. He knew exactly what I wanted. And the best coaching I could do was to get out of his way
Okay.
and just give a pointer here or there and talk about on field, what goes on in between the ears when you're in a game situation and how to react and not react and how to lift people up and not bring people down, how to carry yourself. And so his motion was fantastic. His work ethic was incredible. And he had it. He went to A&M and tore it up, and now he's in Kansas City. We'll see what happens.
Right. That's really good. So I heard you talk a little bit about bullpens, and what are some things that, and this is a little bit separate from coaches, but what are some things that you did uh, to help the guys understand location?
We never threw a bullpen for the sake of throwing pitches. We're not doing that. We're going to pitch. We're not going to throw. And so,
Right.
three on the outside corner, three on the inside corner, three down the middle, curveball, three outside, three inside, three down the middle, changeup, three outside, three inside, and then either up or down or however you want it, however their ball moves. And whatever their strengths were is what I went to because once they gain confidence in that, then they're willing to go, okay, then I can do this pitch and I can do exactly what you want. And it's already built in that I can do this. I've been doing it. And you have a program. You plan your program and then you work your plan. And there was always an end goal. I wanted strikes. And I didn't care if we walk the occasional guy, if we hit somebody. If I tell you to throw it inside and it gets away and the guy steps in, you hit him, you hit him.
Right.
Let's wipe that off and get after it. And we're not going to headhunt anybody, but we're not going to be afraid to say that's our plate too.
Right.
And but we always had a goal: up, down, in, out, middle. And we didn't throw down the middle too much because we don't want to be throwing it down the middle during the game.
Right.
But just so they got an idea of location and we move the ball around. And then when you get that plan going, and the next bullpen we have, okay, I want it outside high, middle waist, inside knee. And then we're going to work backwards and we're going to go inside high, middle, and then outside low. And we always have a goal in mind and we're trying to work that plan. And that is the biggest thing for me with young kids is I think when we get these kids in high school, we go, these kids should know everything there is to know.
And they don't.
No, because
Yeah.
sometimes they were so good, they never had to work on anything before.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're average because they don't know how to work a plan. We've got to teach them what we want. And that way they'll know what they want out of what they're doing.
Work a plan. I like that. Did you do anything? Did you do anything to help them get a feel for curveballs or off speed? Anything differently?
For most of my time, I never wanted a kid to throw a curveball before 16 because of the growth plates.
Hmm.
And so we'd work fastball, and I could show them three or four different ways to throw a fastball and get different rotation on it
Right.
so it dives in different directions, and then a changeup. And my changeup was usually a split finger, so we're not changing our fastball arc, and we're just throwing a changeup with the forkball grip. And that way you can't throw it hard, but you're still throwing with the same velocity with your elbow.
Right.
And we're not torquing the elbow and turning it sideways and everything until we get the growth plate set. Once we learn how to spin a ball, then you start working on location again. You start creating a plan for the curve. If a kid's got a really good curve, we want to save that until we absolutely need it, because then when you drop that in, the other dugout drops their face a little bit and they're like, wow, now he's got that.
Yeah.
And so you're always working a plan so you can go, hey, what can I do to get in their heads? It's not always chatter. I
Right.
told my team, we're not talking to either team. We're not going to fire them up and get them all excited. What we're going to do is we're going to put our thumb down on them and we're going to keep it down on them. And we're not going to say a word. Our play is going to dictate what we're saying. And so we're going to,
Right.
only thing we're going to say is to each other. And we're never going to talk about a guy who gave up a home run or missed a ball. Nobody's trying to do that. We're going to build each other up. We're all out here for each other, and we are a team, not just the guys on the field, but the guys in the dugout, the coaches, the people keeping score, the score announcers. Everybody is on the same team, and we're fighting for the same team.
That's well said. All right, Coach Art Sonato from South Grand Prairie. He wants to know, in the movie they showed you throwing hard. You were throwing 98 to your players in practice. Um, do you think seeing that high velocity on a regular basis helped to slow the game down for your players? That's question number one. And the second part of that question, should pre-game batting practice be a feel-good batting practice or a firm velo batting practice close to what they will see that day in the game?
Oh, I think when you get into a game situation, you're doing BP before a game, you've already done your preparations. And if you know you got a big left handed kid coming up that throws 90, 95, we're going to work on that all week. And then when you come out for a game, BP before the game is going to be, I'm going to feel good and I'm going to get my confidence and everything level because I've worked on this all week already. And we're just going to get after it and go. I think firmness is good. I don't think trying to overpower somebody and throwing from 45 feet and throwing it as hard as you can at them, it does anything
Mhm.
pregame. You don't want to get in your own kid's head and go, well, I couldn't hit coach from 45 feet. Now this guy's throwing 95 at me and I already feel down about myself for BP before the game. You want to build that confidence up so you see your kids with their chins up. I don't want
Right.
my kids looking at the ground. I want them looking at me and each other. Um, what was the first part of that?
So, do you think that that helped to slow down the game for them, them seeing that high velocity, which is kind of what you've said is you do your prep work before the week before, or before the
Yeah,
game. You know, I like that. So, and I think you're right. I think it does slow the game down.
yeah.
For the guys.
I
Coach
think the
Rod.
more you can do that with young, I think the more you can do that with young kids, the more confidence it instills. And so then they can expect more out of themselves. And when they expect more of themselves, they're going to push themselves harder. They want to please their coach. And if the coach always has nothing but negative things to say to that kid, you're going to break their spirit.
Yeah.
And people ask me all the time, they're like, well, how did your kids get so good? Was it because they hit off you? Well, that's one of the things that slowed the game down for them, absolutely, which I didn't even know until I got to the tryout. And I'm like,
Right.
no wonder they could hit fastballs. But the other thing is, I kept telling them they were good until they believed it. And we kept working towards a goal, and we're going to improve ourselves in one facet of the game every day we're here. And if we can do that, we're going to end up being complete players.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart. All right. So, Coach Riley Price, he's the head coach at Eastern New Mexico University, and a former player that kind of both of mine, Alex Bolton. They kind of had the similar question. It's a two-pronged question, and I'll just go ahead and ask the first one. What were your daily habits, routines that you were dedicated to that allowed you to become greater later on in life? So, I'll let you answer that one first.
Um, Dedication to living up to expectation and not down to expectation. At
Living up to.
35, nobody thought you should even be here. And but Roberto Hernandez, my best friend in the big leagues, he would talk to me during all the games. And then we got to Detroit, Doug Jones talked to me. And when I talked to Doug, he was like, he goes, "What's your best pitch?" And I said, "Well, fastball." He goes, "Then throw the fastball." He goes, "People can tell you to throw every other pitch you want to, but if your fastball is what got you here, why would you deviate from that?" He said, "Look at
That's
Mariano
smart.
Rivera."
One
And
pitch.
as far as Roberto went, they both of them are like, the best thing you can do is whether you do well or whether you get ripped, is have a short memory. Because you know what? You're going to be back out there tomorrow night. And you better not have that memory floating around from the night before. So you have a short memory and go with what got you there.
I like that. Second part of the question is what did your preparation consist of physically or mentally to get fully ready for to pitch for the next day?
Mentally, being a reliever, the first time around the minors, I was a starter and I had 5 days to think about how bad I got lit up 5 days previous.
Right.
And that was always a detriment to me because then you go out and you try to overpower everything. And when Bert and Doug talked to me about having a short memory, I just stay loosey goosey. And they said get up, and I'm like okay. And Bert even taught me about that. He goes, "Coach may get you up 3 or 4 times in a game just so other people can see you up in the pen, the other team." He goes, "Don't get up there and throw 98 every time you get up." He goes, "Get yourself warm, be ready to get there, but don't actually put yourself in position where you're going to be in the game and you're throwing a game right now in the bullpen because by the time you get out there, you're going to be tired and it's not going to work."
Right.
And
That
so
makes sense.
pace was a lot.
Pacing yourself. Very good. All right. So here are my questions. I got two of them. First one is what role, and you've kind of answered this already, but what role did your faith and family play into your career?
Faith and family are huge, man. Wouldn't be where I am without both. And now is not a really popular time to be talking about faith and family because we're trying to separate people and we're trying to shame people for going to church. But you know what? Faith is a lot more than going into a church with a door in the front. And faith comes in all sorts of things, but especially in something bigger than yourself. I was never supposed to play again, Alex, ever. And I come
Right.
back throwing 12 miles an hour harder with a slider, which I never had to begin with. That's physically not doable for anybody, especially 12 years later at 35. You don't gain 12 miles an hour. It just doesn't happen unless God wants it to. The rest of that, being able to sit back and watch my kids grow up knowing that their dad went out and did something that nobody thought he could do, not only my kids, but my high school kids
Mm-hmm.
and other kids who have seen the movie. I promised to do this. I went out and I did it, and now I can do it. And then it worked. And then they're like, wow, you can achieve anything. Meaning, looking in the mirror, if I've got a kid who goes, well, maybe I can get there, but then they see somebody do something like, no, I know I can get there.
Right.
You're instilling faith and you're instilling good habits. And so when coaches can do that, you're going to have a team break their backs for you.
Yeah. That's a good point. All right. So the my second question is you were a high school baseball coach, and then you went to play at the major league level. If you were to coach again today, what would you do the same and what would you do differently?
Hmm. Do the same. I probably do the exact same thing. I know what worked and didn't work on me.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've had 4 high schools and 2 colleges that I've worked at and seen what happened with them, I know what that was like back then. And there's not a lot I would change. I want a great work ethic. I want someone who wants to get better every single time out there. I want people who run on the field, run off the field, and people who lift each other up. I can handle losses, but I can't handle ugly losses like not running the ball out to first base
Right.
and not running off the field so you can get up there and get loose and get ready to hit and not running out on the field like you want to be there. If you don't want to be there, don't be there. Don't drag the team down. So I wouldn't change a whole lot about any of the situation I was in. What I would change about me I would have listened more to my junior college coach, Jack Allen, and gone, I'm not ready to go to pro ball yet. I need to stick around for a whole year and see what I've got before I go and make a decision like that, because I found myself in over my head before I knew what happened. And when you start treading water before you even get there, you're in trouble.
Right. That makes sense. So, I mean, basically, you're talking about, uh, the things that worked for you were more the character of the kids and the intangibles that they brought to the team, not necessarily the talent.
Yeah, once those kids know that you care about them and you want the best for them, they'll break their backs for you. And when you get them that, you show them that I'm not only going to talk the talk, but I'm willing to walk the walk. And so I know that not everybody like Sam can go out and run polls every day with their kids. But when you can interact with these kids while they're doing drills in some way, even talking to them while they're doing things, you're instilling in them the fact that they think that I'm worth talking to. I'm going to push myself even harder. When you get that role and that mentality into your kids, there's nothing that they can't achieve because they don't think they can achieve anything. They're going to go out and do whatever it takes to win.
Right. Right. So, Sam Carpenter. I'm getting to work with him right now. I'm really excited. With the Dallas
That's
Mustangs.
awesome.
Yeah, really smart guy. Um,
Well, you must be pretty good too if Sam's got you.
oh man, I don't know about that. I'm learning. Would you mind plugging your book one more time?
Yeah, dreammakersbook.com. It's a story, a little bit about the pack story, the journey to get there, the family struggles, the abuse, then the dream coming true, and then everything that happened after the movie, including 60 surgeries in the last 20 years. Parkinson's, you have it. Parkinson's, you don't. Doctors going, that's not possible. You don't get well from Parkinson's. It doesn't happen. And me sitting there going, nothing's impossible for God.
Wow, amen.
And him showing up every single step of the way.
Well, your story has been and continues to be a major inspiration to a lot of people out there, and I really thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely, coach. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for this week. I hope that Jim's story encouraged you as it did me, and that you're able to get some good ideas out of it for your practices. Please subscribe, like, and share this episode with anyone you think will benefit from it. Send any feedback to revolutionbaseballpodcast@yahoo.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.